Hello and thanks for joining us on Off the Press, where we take a look at stories making headlines on all our national dailies, and I mean mostly all of them. I am Mary-Ann Okon, and today we'll be looking at stories from the Vanguard, This Day, Punch, Sun, The Nation, name it. We'll look at it. But then I will not be doing this alone. I have two gentlemen with me in the studio who will be doing justice to some of those headlines. I have joining me Raymond Nkannebe. He's a legal practitioner. It's good to have you in the studio, Raymond. And sitting next to me is Tobosun Akeju. He's a reputation manager. It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we'll start with our first paper this morning, the Vanguard newspaper, and look at some of the big stories in the Vanguard. Top story here says, sack Buhari, declare me winner, Atiku tells Tribunal. Another one here says, line up 20 SANs, 400 witnesses to fight case, and adds our petition, solid, strong, and unassailable. All right, that's on the top. It's a top story here in the Vanguard newspaper, and of course we can see the picture of some top bank managers. Well, we're not going to go into that, but let's go to the top of the Vanguard newspaper. Rivers, how Wike's police details brutalized us and injured soldiers. Okay. Security threatens intimidates electoral coalition officers, still in Rivers State. Confusion over reports of fresh building collapse in Lagos. I saw that video this morning. Tension as PDP, APC trades tackles ahead of rerun polls in 5 states. And my asset declaration forms tampered with, says Onogan. And of course, the drama continues. So I'll start with you, Nkannebe.
Yes.
Let's look at, because you're a legal practitioner.
Yes.
Atiku saying sack Buhari and declare me winner. What grounds? On what grounds?
Well, of course, you know, the electoral law has actually delimited the extent to which a petitioner could go in breaking a petition. You have to come within 4 grounds, and which are either you say that the election was inconclusive, or maybe the person who won was not qualified to contest the election, or maybe you were nominated by your party, but INEC, for one reason or the other, substituted your name. So these are the limited grounds within which you can go to court to contest any election. And looking at Atiku's petition, it falls within the grounds of widespread irregularities, and to that extent, he is saying that the election should be, that he should be declared the winner, or in the alternative, the entire election should be nullified so that they'll have a rerun. So I think to that extent, his petition conforms with the requirement of the law, you understand? But as per whether the petition is strong, unassailable as they have said, I think that would depend on what happened.
It remains to be seen.
At trial, as the proof of the pudding, they say, is in the eating. Okay,
Tobosun, quickly, do you have something to say about that? Because I want you to talk about what's happening in Rivers. In the news this morning, apparently the army has been accused by INEC of getting involved unnecessarily in the electoral process and distorting it, even though the army is saying that INEC is lopsided. But I want you to look at that quickly. They're saying Wike's police details brutalized us. How would soldiers be brutalized by police details? It sounds really funny. But then this is what the soldiers are saying. And of course, the issue of security threats and intimidation during the last elections.
I think that the issue in Rivers State should not be treated with kid's glove, because when you have government agencies at loggerheads, that's the recipe for chaos. So you have the soldiers accusing the policemen of brutality. I can't even say that with a straight face. And INEC accusing the soldiers. I think that they have to nip that in the bud quickly. The security forces have to, you know, there has to be, I would rather think that maybe there should be a shake-up there quickly. Bring in new hands that would, you know, be responsible only to the general objective and peace of everybody. And because it is, the governor is the chief security officer of the state, so it will not be by the constitution, actually. So, and the governor is most likely closer to the police force in that state than to the military. So the police force can be sympathetic to the governor, because, you know, the jury is out and we are humans, and so we can support whoever we want to support. And so there's already, you know, the ground has been laid for confusions there. So it is important that quickly something is done, you know, to make sure that even when there's a rerun, irrespective of which party it is a free and fair process and devoid of violence, because that state is on the precipice of
interesting.
danger.
Let's move on to this day newspaper. The biggest story here says, declare me winner, Atiku tells election petition tribunal. Okon accuses the federal government of mutilating his asset declaration forms. Still in this day newspaper, CBN considers single-digit funding support for oil palm sector. Oh, I pray for this day. And of course, BPE receives 5 bids for Yola Disco and Afam Genko. There's a rider under the Atiku story. Of course, he's filing petition against Buhari's victory, alleges massive rigging, malpractices, and non-compliance with electoral laws. PDP asks Nigerians to be wary of the president's antics. And of course, governorship election, Army rejects INEC's report on rivers. Let's talk water on Okon. I'll take you before we go to him.
I think that accusation is a very, very big one, but it's a case in court, so I'm actually going to be very careful about talking about it. But saying that the real basis for, you know, this whole problem with the former Chief Justice of Nigeria, the real evidence, or perhaps the bone of contention, has now become where he's challenging even the authenticity of what they've accused him of.
Because again, the due process, according to them, was not followed.
Yes.
So what Okon and his people are saying is, even if you caught me in a scene of a crime, if you do not go through the due process in arresting me, Mirandizing me, I know we don't Mirandize in Nigeria, but you know, you have to, if you were in America, you would Mirandize the person, you have the right to remain silent. If you do not do that, a judge can throw out the case because you didn't Mirandize, and maybe that's what the Okon case is
you're right.
on to.
Yeah, you know, even if you bring in evidences that were not properly collected, so if you steal evidence, it won't be admissible in court. So I think what I see here is that this issue is going to be thrown out of court in any time soon. So
what do you think, Nkannebe?
Just putting it in legal context, I think that is just the process, because that happened, that was following what happened at yesterday's proceedings, when the prosecution was about tendering the forms for 2014-2015, then the CJN, through his lawyer, Mr. Womol SAN, said that these forms have been tampered with. So any defense team could raise any defense to the tendering of any document that might be critical to the client's case, you understand? So I just see this as another objection that might be overruled before the process. Proper. Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about the single-digit funding support for the oil palm sector. We've all been asking that agriculture become a front burner issue all over again, and the CBN somewhat seems to be spearheading this. Should we be excited overly, or should we just wait and see?
I think it's what being excited about.
Okay.
However, and the CBN, Ministry of Agriculture, the federal government should be commended. However, I think that we need to also move a step further in the agriculture space. And I say this because, you see, the production bit of agriculture is what we seem to constantly really focus on. But the meat, the most interesting part in the agricultural chain is actually processing. So a kilogram of cocoa seeds, you can't compare the price or the value of a kilogram of cocoa seeds to a kilogram of chocolate. You then imagine the value at the jobs that will be created, the socio-economic impact of having a factory processing that, the byproduct from, you know, the processing. So when we focus on people growing, because that news is really giving single-digit funding to support farmers. That's what it looks like on the surface, or that's what they are said in the news. Perhaps if we dig deeper into it, we might see that, oh, if you are also trying to set up an oil palm processing plant, maybe you'll be able to enjoy. But I think that while we're encouraging people to grow and produce in agriculture, I think we should aggressively also encourage people to go in from a processing point, because that is when we'll be able to, fully benefit from the agri-value chain.
Nkannebe.
Well, we must commend federal government for, all along we've been hearing government trying to diversify from oil, but you cannot really actually diversify without creating incentives for the agricultural sector to thrive. So a step in that of that nature is, I see it as the government trying to match their words with actions to see that the agricultural
Well, for more details on that story, you can go to page 8 of This Day newspaper to get more information. Let's move over to the Punch newspaper. Big stories here. Runoffs, APC, PDP woo voters with money, gifts and lobby other parties. And of course the writer there, Bauchi Plateau governors visit Buhari over inconclusive polls. Top left of the Punch newspaper, Ogun APC warns banks against granting Amosun loans and overdrafts. And on the right side, of course, CCT opens on Ogun's trial, I beg your pardon, and calls for first witness Shehu Yaradwa's foundation and others to lose 4.8 billion naira properties. And of course, out-of-school children's parents may face trial, says the federal government. Teenager loses sight in Oyo after SARS torture. Oh dear. And rerun, we don't take orders from anybody, INEC tells the APC. Oh dear. It seems to be a very interesting front page for the Punch newspaper. Nkannebe, let's start with the runoffs. Of course, APC, PDP wooing. So we still are in that era of money politics.
Yes, well, when I saw that headline, I just go to further substantiate the fact that in sub-Saharan African democracies, we've not moved away from the impact of money in the process. You understand? Even though the parties in that report, the political parties, that the PDP and APC have come out to deny that they are not involved in all of that, but the word on the street suggests that they're actually involved in that process, giving out soaps, cash sums, wrappers, fabrics, and all of that. And if you look at the fact that those states, the 5 states involved in the runoff, are states where the PDP is likely or is perceived to be winning and might likely take up those states. You see them trying. I'm sure they're going to do everything they can to make sure that they take those states, because they are quite critical states. You have Kano, we have Bauchi, you have Adamawa, you have Plateau, and you have Benue State. These are quite critical states with large voting blocks. So the party will do all within its power to make sure that by Saturday they can actually take over those states. But I also see that whatever is being done should be within the limits or what is stated by the
within the confines of the law, I guess. What do you think?
I first of all think that our democracy is growing. I think we're getting more mature. If you look at the just concluded elections, there was still a lot of money, they were voter buying, but the impact was, when you compare it to the 2015, was not significant. So it was not a matter of who could spend most money. I think the people are starting to have a mind of their own. And what we continue to hope and wish for is that we have a strengthened democracy, so that by the time the parties and those people involved see that the money is not really a differentiating factor, then it will wither off. Having said that, the only reason why we still have a bit of money impact is because there's poverty in the land. If people are well off, you would not be able to buy the next 4 years with something that I'll finish spending on that day. So I think we'll get there. And the runoffs will, I think, the strength of it will be how much of support the parties involved are able to pull from the voters, how much promise, genuine promise they're able to make to the people, and the people will believe them. I think it will also come out with how INEC and the electoral process in general is able to be free and fair.
Okay. I think so I'm going to pose 2 questions to you just shortly, 2 different. So I want you to talk about the teenager who lost his sight in Oyo State after the SARS men or operatives tortured I mean, I can see him. He obviously needed to wear glasses right after that. And one would think that, you know, we're done with this SARS situation, but it seems to keep raising its ugly head.
Yes, after Mr. Segalink on Twitter went to town with his End SARS campaign, and we saw the former IG of police coming in to kind of restructure the SARS architecture. We actually thought that would put an end to this cycle of rascality or brutality from the part of that arm of the police. But all of a sudden, it seems nothing seems to be happening, and it's a really bad one. And I don't know the relatives, or I don't know if they could take that up with the law enforcement agent and probably see if they can bring the particular officer involved to court and then let the law have its full course.
Well, how easy will it be? Let's talk about out-of-school children. The federal government is saying they might criminalize the fact that you're not letting your children go to school. How easy do you think that's going to be for us?
I don't think it's going to be easy. You look at what happened in Tafaji, and one of the most, emotional story from there was the man whose kids were not in school for a few weeks and had to go and borrow money for those kids to go to school, and then lost them in that mishap. And so how do you tell people that you're going to send them to jail for something that is not entirely their fault? I think that what is first important is for us to build a system. Systems are always important because irrespective of who is there, you're able to run. And so if you have a system where there's quality education and there are schools people can attend, and those kids are not going to school to sit on the floor, or they don't have teachers, or the building is dilapidated, you have good schools, then you can criminalize parents for not sending their kids to school. But if we do not have that, I do not think that it will be balanced to criminalize.
So it won't be easy to deal with. Yes. All right, let's move to the Nation newspaper. Top stories in the Nation newspaper. Anxiety in Benue, Kano, Bauchi ahead of elections. Of course, CBN eyes $10 billion revenue from palm oil. And of course, we'll do justice in Sugar's murder, says Oyo CP. NBA president's trial defense seeks evidence. Still in the Nation newspaper, top right of the paper, PDP Atiku file petition to a day-to deadline. JAM insists on use of biometrics. Igalo, Iwobi, and others hit Eagles camp. I like to call him Iwobi, just as they call him. I'm afraid of returning to school is another top story here. You can find that on page 40 of the Nation newspaper. And soldiers recall night of horror in Rivers. PDP, SARS intimidating coalition officers. Wow, it's not just the army, the SARS. It just seemed to be like a free-for-all for security agencies. But let's talk about the anxiety in Benue, Kano, Bauchi ahead of elections. Buhari is speaking to the governor, saying seek legal redress. Kano elders warn against crisis. And of course, there's a row in Bauchi over INEC stands. So there are lots of people who do not seem to agree with what INEC has resorted to. What do you think?
Again, the rerun in this state will have to be handled very, very carefully, because you have a ruling party who has won at the central, like to say, and this state you have one of the states we call the Kardashian state, Kano, and the Kano bids in the last two elections have been a very, very crucial state in winning the central. So I believe the APC is also already looking at 2023, and for that reason, will try very hard to keep a state like Kano. And Benue, Benue in the last 2 years too has not been all peaceful. We have a governor who fell out with his party and all of that. So it's you don't need a prophet to tell you that we'll have issues here. And I think that we have to handle them with extra care. I think the federal government, the INEC, the security forces, we have to see beyond the benefit to the party or to the parties involved and say that the security and the peace of the people, or of the state, of the nation in general, is the most important thing. And let's focus on that, to make sure that, we have a free and fair election in this state.
All right. So quickly, we hear that in the issue of Fayoshe, court admits Obanikoro's dead aid statement in the evidence. Will this hold water? I'd like to quickly.
Well, the law allows that to happen.
A dead man's statement.
Provided that you laid adequate foundation You understand? The court can receive a statement not made by somebody who is not even caught, provided that you lay foundation. Okay, he made this statement at a time the offense was committed, but between when the offense was committed and trial, he has died. Then you lay that foundation, and the court can receive that evidence and rely on it to convict. So I don't think it's an extra legal process. But if you may just allow me to weigh in on the Bauchi scenario. We saw the incumbent governor yesterday at the presidential villa trying to, perhaps he said he went to brief the president on what is happening in his state and why he thinks he should go to court to challenge the decision of INEC in continuing the collation of results in Tafa Balewa and all the units that were affected. From my own perspective, I think he's a bit wrong to the extent that before he was making the argument that as at this stage, that is only the tribunal that can actually intervene in what is happening in that state, that the collation officer had made a return. But I think that is a wrong procedure. It is only after a return had been made that the election tribunals can step in. What happened in Bauchi was inconclusive, and INEC said, okay, we'll look at the situation and then we'll come back to give direction. And they have gone back and said that, okay, we can actually proceed. They have not made a return in that state, so the courts cannot actually step in as of yet.
Step into the issue. All right. Well, we have very little time to go. Unfortunately, we would like to apologize. We cannot bring you Plus Sports, the sports segment on the show this morning. But let's quickly wrap up on these issues. 25 defected senators from the New Telegraph, I beg your pardon, this morning. Top story, 25 defected senators lose re-election and Guba bids. Wow. Only Malaye Omoagege survived in APC and the PDP. Saraki, Akpabio, Uba, Nyako, Gemade, top losers chart. That's an interesting one, the way they put it. And of course, this one says, declare me president-elect or nullify Buhari's victory. Atiku tells the Tribunal. Of course, we've talked about that. Inconclusive polls, APC governors rush to Buhari. I like this New Telegraph. Their headlines are interesting. My assets declaration forms tampered with on Noggin. 2 injured as building collapses during demolition, and court admits dead man's statement in Fayoshe's trial. Let's talk about the defected senators who somewhat have lost their elections and the ones who survived. Omoagege survived, of course, Dino Malaye. I mean, it would be a boring Senate without Malaye, on a lighter note. But let's start.
Well, I think Omoagege's position is even standing on a tightrope as we speak, because yesterday a federal high court in that state nullified the faction that brought about his candidacy. So that means if it happened, if the upper court upheld the trial court decision, we might also have a situation whereby Omoagege loses out loses his seat in the Senate. But beyond that, you know, the permutations that led to these politicians leaving their party for the next party, perhaps they got their calculations a bit wrong, and they are now paying dearly for it. I'm really surprised that Milai was able to come out unscathed. Perhaps he must be a political warhorse in his state for him to have.
I'm guessing,
despite being on trees, police stations, sleeping throughout the campaign process, and then he was able to make it. I must give it up to him.
All right, quickly, because we're wrapping up.
Okay, so I think one thing that came out of the 2019 election is the fact that the people are voting at some levels, or generally, people voted more for personalities than parties. So that's why some people were, you know, irrespective of the party they're strong politicians. And I think that's the case for Milai. He's a strong politician where he's from, and that's probably why he won. And for people who lost, it's also an issue of almost like, we don't want you. So if you look at Saraki, it was a Otoge campaign. So I think that's the summary of what we can get from there.
All right, well, we have to wrap things up on Off the Press. We want to say thank you to Raymond Nkannebe. He's a legal practitioner, and Tobosun Akeju, reputation manager. Thank you, gentlemen, for speaking with us. And that's it on Off the Press. My name is Mary-Ann Okon. Up next, we have Plus Sports. Stay with us.